Level Up and Live, the podcast that helps you transform your life one episode at a time. I'm your host, Sean Myers, joined by my co-host, Ewan Heinemeyer. And today, we have a special guest in the virtual studio. Joining us today is Kim Hynes, the owner of Kim Hynes Health and Wellness, and the host of the Emotional Eats podcast. Kim is dedicated to guiding men and women over 40 on a journey to make peace with food, their bodies, and embrace self-love and confidence. As a certified nutritional and emotional eating coach, Kim empowers her clients to ditch harmful eating patterns and self-criticism, clearing the way for fulfillment in personal and professional areas of their lives. With a background including an MBA and certifications from the Institute of Integrative Nutrition, alongside specializations in tapping, gut health, and food addiction, Kim offers a holistic approach to wellness. She co-owns a practice with therapists, enhancing her support for clients' mental well-being. Outside the office, Kim's life is full with her husband, Mike, their 4 adult children, pets, and a love for outdoors. Her own journey through body image challenges, perfectionism, and disordered eating deeply informs her compassionate coaching, bringing hope and transformation to her clients. Stay tuned as Kim shares her insights and wisdom with us. But first, a quick reminder to subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review to let us know what you liked about this episode. Don't forget to share it with a friend who needs to hear this, and be sure to check out our show notes for additional resources. Without further ado, the one and only Kim Hynes.
I know I say this every time we start an episode because we talk with our guests before and we start talking with them, and there's always that moment where it's like, we got to start recording. And it's just happens over and over. And this one, I am really drawn in because I know food and the mindset psychologically, the things that I've eaten in the past and the way I've eaten them. I know it's something to do with my mind, and I've never dug in before. I don't know why. Like I've got a general idea, but today that's going to be the whole discussion with Kim Hynes. I mean, you bring peace to people through their connection with food and how they interpret it and what it is in their lives and what it does to their bodies, their energy. Which impacts everything: relationship, productivity, all the things. And it can be an absolute torment in people's lives when they don't know what's going on, and you bring light to that. So I'm just super excited about this conversation. If you could give us a little bit about yourself so the audience can hear, and we'll jump in.
Oh, thank you. And it's such a pleasure to be here and talk with you all. My name is Kim. I'm a nutritional health coach. I specialize in emotional eating and stress eating because I understand that no matter what stage of life we're in, we're not really just about the intake of the food and fueling our bodies. Many of us use food in a lot of different ways, and I want to help everyone learn to have pleasure with food. Again, it's not the enemy, but also to be able to feel in control with it, because sometimes we just feel so out of control. And I also make the connections to people's lives. And I came from a very disordered eating background. And it was all the way back from, I can trace it back to different moments in my childhood, but I brought it all the way into my late 30s and early 40s. So I want to help people overcome that, because as we get older, it's even more important for us we can get away with a lot in our 20s and 30s. But as we get older, we really have to start paying attention because of the chronic illness, because of the injuries. So when I went to school, I started in business and I hated it. I even got an MBA because the company I worked for, I loved the relationships, but I didn't love contributing to not necessarily people, to a company's bottom line. And I ended up becoming a high school math teacher after that because I tutored math on the side, and I was a cross country coach. And when I was a coach and I was working with young women and young men who were not eating or fueling their bodies well, it really started to make me think we're not educating kids very early. But then I had teachers who were working hours that were ridiculous. And what is the one thing that everybody brings to teachers? They bring food, they bring chocolate, they bring cakes. And there was a birthday cake, in the student lounge and the teacher's lounge every single day of the year. There was pizza every Friday. And we just didn't have the education on it. And everyone kept saying, I need to work out more and eat less. And as both of you know, I had a lot of time running. Also, I picked that up when I got divorced, and we can talk about that and the emotional impact that had. but I was able to hide all those disordered behaviors because of that. So when I decided to become a coach and go back to school for nutrition, it was so selfish. It was selfish. It was for me. And I ended up learning so much about myself emotionally and physically that that's how I became a coach. And now I work with mostly women, but I have a lot of men because emotional eating is really happening to everyone.
Yeah, and you say 40s and 50-year-olds, and it's mainly women. But to me, it's really anything you say today applies to like you just said, like everybody at any age. Because there's kids that are obese now, and they're already dealing with that. So it's amazing. Like at different ages, different genders, does the mindset, is it different? Or is it all the same? And there's just this one like is emotional trauma, and it creates this food habit, or how would you sum that up? Like, what is that?
I think there are two things going on. The first one is the emotional component that food, especially processed food and sugar, it gives us such a dopamine hit. It makes us feel good. It makes us want to have more, and it temporarily solves our problems. Just like scrolling on the phone, just like watching a Netflix movie, whatever it is, that stimulation takes away and helps us escape from the day. The second part of it is it really is overly palatable food because food scientists are working to make this taste better and better and better. So this is happening to everyone, whether you're 10 years old or whether you're 20 or 50, we're still dealing with all of that. But what is really important is when anybody can pinpoint as early as possible what they're feeling and why they feel that way. Then they can figure out, why am I using this? Why am I using any of these methods to cope?
Well, I'm curious. So somebody listening to this, right? And even myself, I struggled with it up until probably about 2 years ago. And if our avid listeners, they know like my journey. I used to have, I would call it pizza Sundays. So every Sunday I would get a medium pizza, and I would just crush that medium pizza. And when I reflect back, I'm like, well, why did I do that? Right. And so for me, it was a couple of things. It was just because it was what I was familiar with, because when I did it every Sunday, I was like, oh, this Sunday, it was something to look forward to, almost like I'm going to be eating this pizza. And then when I ate the pizza, it would just almost numb me. And I don't know if you can resonate with that. And I don't know if our listeners can resonate with that. But every time I would eat food, whether it was a dessert, whether it was a pizza, and even when I think about social media and some of the things that we do on a daily basis, is it numbs. So I don't have to think about what's going on in my life. In other words, I don't have to stare down the things that I really need to be working on. And I used food a lot to do that. And of course, I didn't know it at the time, but I'm curious on somebody like me. If you were speaking to somebody like me 2 years ago, and I said, this is what I'm going through, what would be one tip or even two tips that you would give me so I could apply moving forward to get out of this rut? Because I don't want to pick my head up in 5, 10, 15, 20 years doing the same thing.
That is such a wonderful question. And that is literally, like someone walking in my office, that's something that they would ask me because there are so many factors going on when we are using food to numb. And the first thing is when you're not eating, because when you are looking at things right after you eat or when you're in the middle of it, there's so much shame and guilt around that if you even recognize that you're in the middle of it. So when you're not eating, to figure out what is it that you're really looking for on that Sunday, what did you really need? Did you need a break? Did you need rest time? Did you need recovery time? Did you need connection time with someone? Did you need alone time? Because sometimes we also do this when we're alone because we're finally coming down. We're coming down from a week that we just like that's our outlet. So if you can look and make a list of things that you could do instead. So some of my clients will, I live near the beach, so they'll go to the beach. Some of my clients will just walk in nature. They'll take a walk. They'll treat themselves to a really nourishing meal. And I'm not talking clean, perfect. I'm talking get your nutrients in first. And then if you want to follow that up with a cookie or something, there's reasoning behind that, by the way, with blood sugar too, because when we overindulge, we're really messing up our blood sugar, which changes our mood on top of the mood that we're already in. Yeah. And it definitely, and then you feel like when you have a high from that, you want to eat even more. And you want to
Yes.
just keep going to the next thing, and your blood sugar is just calling to you. You don't even really have control in your brain. And the other thing, this is the other side of it though. If you really want that pizza because you have been nourishing your body, you've been working out, you've been taking care of connection and sleep and reducing your stress, let's say you really want that pizza and you really want it for the right reason, it just tastes good, that's a little ritual of yours, then really being careful with it. We have permission to eat. And when you tell yourself you don't have permission to eat, that's when we run into trouble, because the negative thoughts in our head make you feel like you're wrong. And we're kind of drawn to that. We're drawn to eating. But the first 3 bites of any food, I always call this the 3 bite rule. And it doesn't mean you only eat 3 bites. It means the first bite on your taste buds and your dopamine receptors is like, pow, it is so good. It tastes wonderful. That's that first bite. That second bite's pretty good. And the third bite, it's good, but it's not the same as the first. And when we start getting mindless and we're eating really, really fast, we just keep going. And there's a difference between eating 2 or 3 pieces of pizza and loving them and being okay and settling in with that and saying, I am satisfied, and eating an entire pizza because you've just lost it. You're kind of living off that first memory. Your mind is somewhere else. You're just, like you said, numbing was the perfect word. We're just numbing out. We're vegging out. And, again, it's just like me going and looking at reels or TikTok. I'm like, I'm going to look at 1 or 2. Everything's fine. And 2 hours later, I'm, I'm like, yeah, I was just supposed to post something and I didn't get to it. So that, or watching, reality TV or something, we really find ways, but we can't work on it in the middle of it. We have to work on it other times where we could maybe be journaling about what we're going through, or finding coping mechanisms that feel good, that don't have the food involved. And I said this at the beginning, when you nourish yourself first and get the nutrients you need, you are full, you have the nutrients, your blood sugar's stable, and I call that the balanced plate, then yeah, add a cookie. And it's not going to change your blood sugar as much. You're going to get that taste, you're going to get what you want. But what we don't realize is what we really want is to just not be there and not deal with it. So rest and relaxation may be something that somebody really needs. And I also talk about secret eating, because when you're alone, the damage is so much bigger, because then you're also not getting judged for what you're eating.
You said earlier wrong, like and we're drawn to that because it's wrong, and we're drawn in, and then guilt and shame. I'm sure that's all wrapped up in there. Why do you think we're drawn to that wrongness? Like, because I know that feeling. There's jelly beans in the pantry, and it's like, I know I shouldn't, and it's making me go over there even more. Like what is that?
Yes. Well, it's interesting because there's a psychological fact that when someone says, and this is so cliche, but don't think about the pink elephant. So we all have pink elephants in our head. And I, for one, and when someone says you can't have chocolate, I'm like a naughty 5-year-old. I'm like, okay, where's the chocolate? I'm looking for it. I'm going through and
So true.
foraging in my house.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely a psychological fact that that negative thought, we're just human. Those negative thoughts are going to come in, and we're going to have that rebellious side. But when you give yourself permission, and I say to that chocolate, hey, I can eat you in 5 minutes. I can eat you in 20 minutes. I can eat you tomorrow. I have the power back when I take away that novelty by giving myself permission. And when I talk to people, I have a conversation about forbidden foods. Well, I just can't have it in the house. Well, we can work to have it in the house, but remembering that I can have that anytime I want, but I'm choosing to have it right after my meal so that I'm not having a negative impact. And then let's say you have it. The worst thing we can do is make ourselves feel terrible. So, what we'll do is, I work with my clients a lot on giving themselves grace and love through this process, because the more that we beat ourselves up, I want you to be curious over being critical, because curiosity is how we learn, right? Observation. Look at yourself from the outside. What the heck is going on? And we all know this. We were talking about sleep before offline. When you are fatigued, when you are tired, when you are just having a cranky day, the odds are against you. So give yourself a break and some love, because what's our source of energy? I mean, we love glucose, carbs, and sugar. Our body's not dumb. It knows what it wants. We just have to be careful about knowing what's going on with ourselves.
Do you do the
Kim,
break?
what
Oh,
would you
sorry. Go
tell
ahead.
somebody that if they're for 30 days, right? For 30 days, January 1st, they hammered it, they're eating good, they're eating clean, they've had a couple hiccups, but they got back up on their saddle and they're eating good, right? For 30, 45 days, 60 days. I know a lot of people in my life that 30-day, 45-day mark, they just, and then I talk to them 60 days, 90 days, and I'm like, hey, how's the new
Mhm.
lifestyle going, right? How's the new diet going? Well, it's not going so good, right? They fall back into the eating the pizza. They fall back into the fast food. They fall back into what they were doing before, and then they slip out, and now they're, now stuff starts slipping in, self-doubt and all these things, right? Lack of confidence. What would you tell that individual if somebody walked into the office and said that's what they struggle with, is that consistency?
Yes. And when people come to me, the first thing I say to them is, if you want to count macros, you want to count calories, and you want to only be skinny, I'm not your girl. I just throw that out there, because diet culture has created something for us that we have to be restrictive, cut out food groups, we have to cut down to a certain number of calories, and there's no internal inside health that is what we're working on. I understand everyone who comes to me wants to lose weight. I understand that. And right now, I have a ton of people coming to me who are going off Ozempic and Wegovy and all the semaglutides, and they're trying not to gain that weight back,
Mhm.
because they're falling back into diet culture, which is restriction. Anything that tells you not to listen to your body is diet culture. And when you go on something for 30 days, 45 days, you're following somebody else's plan instead of the Sean plan, the Yoon plan, the Kim plan. We all have individual bodies. We have individual lives. We have different levels of activity. We have different preferences in food. So
Mhm.
when I work with someone, we get very granular into their life, and we also talk about, okay, so let's look a little bit bigger picture. Yes, you want to lose weight, but if you don't chase the health, the body can't follow. And if we don't allow ourselves to live life once in a while, then there's always going to be, like, I went through the binge restrict cycle. I would restrict, 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 and then I'd turn around and I'd binge. And I'd do like 6 days great. And then, like you were talking about the pizza, I'd have a day where I just couldn't stop and I would just keep looking for things. And people are so into quick fix. We get text messages. I have people who will call me 3 times on the phone and not leave them that message. They just keep calling until I pick up. And I have people like text messaging, like, question mark, why aren't you picking up? We are so used to that. People will throw food in your window as you drive by.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
amazing. Yet we think that losing weight and getting healthy and regulating blood sugar and building muscle is going to happen in 30 days or 45 days. So that's a conversation I have to have with everyone. And just to also remember that, what can you do forever? That's the plan you need to be on. And when I work with people, I have a different model. So many people have and I'm putting in air quotes for everyone who's audio. We have a program out there, and I don't have a program. I work with everyone, and we start in the chapter that they're in. So, like, I may be in chapter 10, and you may be in chapter 2, you may be in chapter 8 of this book, and we start where you are. And yeah, I always ask everyone, stick with me for 3 to 6 months. But I'm not going to put you in this situation where if it's you're hating it, you don't want to be, I want you to love this. I want you to love the changes you're making, love the food you're eating, love the fact that we're digging into emotions. We're digging up some things that help you in other parts of your life, not just food. So we go session by session. And you hang in there with me as long as you can, where you feel like, hey, I can run free. And then people will come back to me. They'll come back for maintenance sessions every, 3 to 6 months. I have one person who's been with me for 2 years. He's lost 70 pounds.
Wow.
And he is just like, hey, this is working, just to talk about it every couple weeks.
Is there ever that aha moment, like you can put your finger on with people, like because I'm sure it happens at different times with different people. You mentioned there's different chapters, like you'd have to determine which chapter they're in first, and being in the early chapters, is that harder for most, or is everybody different, or do you see any patterns with people that you can kind of hone in on?
Yes, and it goes back to the question about dropping off after 30 or 45 days. The beginning is so challenging because I have to change and rewire the thoughts around food and around dieting. And it's so part of mindset might be kind of a cliche term, but it really is where we sit with our thoughts. And everyone, men not so much. Men think they can outlift everything. Women think they can just tell me every calorie count. Well, I know it's 150 calories, and I'm like, well, who cares? It's your hormones work with different calories in different ways. So those are the things. Yes, I have to really rewire, and I have to ask them. But this is why they stay with me, is because they know they've tried everything. They have literally tried every diet that's come along, and some really weird ones and some really kind of practical ones. But because it's a diet and they can't stick to it, they always go the opposite direction. And then on the other side of it, I do have people who come in who are not necessarily dieting, or wanting to lose weight, but they do because they've come in for type 2 diabetes. They've come in for autoimmune disease. They've come in because they feel very inflamed all the time. But when we focus, they're easier because when we say, okay, we're going to work on gut health and we're going to work on changing your habits around stress and sleep, they're easier because they're not looking to lose the 10 pounds in 30 days.
You
Love
said
that.
something there with
Kim, one of shifting gears a little bit. So one of our avid listeners sent in some questions to ask you, and I want to make sure I get this because I feel like this is going to be one of those podcasts, this episodes that's going to go by really quick. So I want to make sure I get this in there. You ready for this question? This is from one
Yes.
of our raving fan listeners. So she asked, can you talk about how emotions can sabotage someone's ability to lose weight, even though they have been doing everything possible to lose weight?
Yes, absolutely. So, something we didn't talk about is emotions create these feelings, and feelings can create stress. And the hormone cortisol, when we're continually spiking that, that's another thing that works against us. And when you spike cortisol, it's not just that stress, that fight or flight, and wanting to stress eat. We can actually be dumping, blood sugars into our body also at the same time. So I think that emotions, when we're not dealing with those, we're not really looking at how can we calm ourselves, our nervous system every day. That will sabotage even the best of plans, because it will either increase your appetite, or our other hormones, ghrelin and leptin, those are our hunger hormones. Whether we're full or whether we're hungry, those can be skewed by all that cortisol. And, I don't know if either of you have gone to the fair and seen the whack-a-mole thing where the little mole comes up and you're trying to hit it.
Yeah.
Hormones are constantly going. And when you're messing up even a few of them, we've got up to 50 hormones probably in our bodies. And so everything is really going all over the place. So cortisol is a big one that creates that hormone. imbalance. So with emotions, this is one of the things that I do with my clients, but you can do so many different things, and I'll give you other options. I do tapping, which is EFT, emotional freedom technique, and I am a certified tapping coach because I find when I can bring my clients' nervous system down and teach them how to do it, it's not just about me doing it. I want them to do it at home. Then they can actually get centered enough to figure out what is my next step. People do tapping around food. I just did tapping with someone around alcohol who wanted to give up alcohol. But journaling, walking, like if you're not into that stuff, or meditation's great, but some people just can't calm down enough to drop in. Walking, journaling, any kind of physical activity. Sometimes when you have emotions, some people want to calm down, but before they calm down, doing 10 jumping jacks, doing 10 squats sometimes will help, just to kind of like shake it up and break whatever's going on and then bring everything back down. So emotions are tough though. Things come on and we don't feel like we have control. And that's when we have to say, you know what? My thoughts don't need to control me. I just have to understand that when those thoughts come in, I have to just practice saying, these don't need to rule me, and I can find the truth. Because sometimes emotions are liars. They come in and they lie to you. And you get these emotions like, I'm not good enough. This person hates me. I'm terrible. I eat too much. And those are liars. And if you can say, okay, what's really the truth? And that's why I love tapping. Tapping helps us really get to the truth very quickly.
I was thinking, when you add all this up, like all the things, like it can seem like it's going to be like a lot of work, right? And a lot of people have tried everything already. Like they think they've tried it all, but only if they were to think they've only tried what they know to do. Because obviously there's other ways. People have come to you and they've tried it all, but they have not got any results yet. And then they come to you and they get results. So they didn't try it all. They had not, because, which I say that to say that there's hope, right? Because if you're feeling, if you're not in the shape that you should be or feeling good, there's something off, and there are ways to get it. You just haven't found that way yet. But if we're adding all this up, there's the emotional side and the conversations you have with yourself, and we're dealing with hormones that bounce around, and there's sleep and the leptin and ghrelin and dopamine and all this, and training yourself over long periods of time. It's a lot. Is there any way, so to give hope to people, is there any version of this where it's like, that's overwhelming for someone to hear all this? Like, how are they ever going to get there if they've never heard it before and they're hearing this for the first time? It's just overwhelming. What would you say to them to be like, hey, it's doable, it's possible, and it's not going to be as long as you think type, how do you kind of have that hope building conversation?
That is so amazing. And as a faith-filled woman, like hope is one of my number one words, hope and then grace. And there is always hope. Absolutely. And what I share with my clients is you do not have to be perfect. And that's what diet culture tells you is you have to be perfect. You have to eat perfectly, exercise for an hour every day in the gym. And it has to be in a gym. It can't be at home, and you can't just walk, and you have to have the perfect body, and you have to shrink yourself. When we get away from perfectionism and we pick the low lying fruit first. So, for example, the lowest lying fruit, like I'm just the lowest hanging fruit there, is drinking water. That might be where we have to start, because a lot of people don't even drink enough water, and they don't realize how that can change their mood. Just dehydration alone, attitude, mood, fatigue, hunger. They come in with a lot of myths. When we bust the myths that you don't have to eat exactly this way just because Dr. So and so online said it. So the lowest hanging fruit that they need, literally walking. I have some people that just walk to their mailbox and back to get started. And when they realize, wow, I'm at my mailbox, I can go a little further, then they come back. And you both know, because I hear you talk about these small sustainable changes. We start small, and when I send them off after the first time, we're not doing all of this. We're picking the things that are doable, because when we do something every single day, even if it's so small, I think of brushing our teeth. Like we couldn't imagine, like we can walk around the house and we could put a pot of water on the stove. We can brush our teeth at the same time. We can, it's so innate now that we can do it without thinking. And for those of us who work out all the time, we can't live without it. It ruins our mood if we don't get it in. Those of us who eat well, we know that when we have that blowout cheat day, then we feel terrible afterwards
Yeah.
for many different reasons. That's it. Just one little thing every single day. Even changing a breakfast. I'll start with a breakfast. Don't even change all 3 meals. Let's just start with breakfast and make sure that it's balanced enough so that you're not eating something that's going to start your day with just pure sugar. Or,
And
you
Kim,
know,
sorry to interrupt. What would a
that's okay.
balanced breakfast be?
Okay, so everyone is different, and I don't like to have people pigeonholed into something, but I am going to share with you specifically. This is because I work with a lot of women whose hormones are really changing right now. Um, I love a plate that has the protein on it, and there's a reason behind that. I'll explain that. A lot of fiber. I'll explain that too. Healthy fats, and we do actually need some carbs in there. Those of us who are trying to be active in our brain, let's start with the protein. As we age, and I've had a lot of experts on my podcast to help me with this, so I'm not pretending to be an expert on that, but we are losing muscle mass at a rate of 3 to 8% every decade after age 30. Muscle is the thing that we really need as we are aging, not just to work out, not just to be competitive, just we need that for our brain, for our gut, for our heart. It's an endocrine organ. It helps us with our hormones. It's not just a skeletal issue. The fiber, because we're eating the protein, we also need fiber because women and men are starting. I'm starting to see this in men too. It's not just a menopausal thing. It might be with andropause in men too. TMI, but I'm a health coach. Constipation is an issue as we get older, and we're trying to eat more protein. So that fiber is amazing because when you have all this hormonal action, you don't want excess hormones. You want to have a very clear pathway. And, the leafy greens, the cabbage, the broccoli, the cauliflower, all of those are so helpful, but it also cleans out our system. And we need that and the antioxidants and, all the things that we want to deal with to fight cancer and free radicals. And then, of course, I think I was guilty of this too. I cut out carbs completely, and when you're trying to be active and sleep well, we still need some of those carbs in there too. And when I put carbs and fiber separately because vegetables are carbs, but there's nothing better at night than to have a little bit of rice or potato or something that's very calming to our system. And especially if you are working out, running, whatever you're doing, we still need those. We just don't need to have, a bagel with breakfast, a sandwich, and plus we're running into so much gluten intolerance for people. That's not everybody, by the way. So don't think when I say that, because I'm afraid to say that almost, people will run out and say, well, I got to stop eating gluten. And that's, everybody's different.
Yeah. For somebody that's listening to this, they've done these things, they get it, right? Like, okay, I've got to stay consistent, right? I'm a big fan of the 80-20 rule. So if I have 21 meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 80% of the time I'm eating whole foods, right? That's just what works best for me. And so that's why I kind of preach and teach, right? And then the other 20% of the time, I'm eating a cookie crumble. I mean, I'm doing something, right? And it's typically around lunchtime, not dinner time, because if I eat dinner time, my resting heart rate goes through the roof after tracking all that. But I'm curious with somebody that's busy, right? They're a mom, they're an athlete, they're running businesses, and they're on the go from the time they get up to the time they go to sleep. There's so much distraction out there, right? Every billboard that you see, every restaurant that you see, especially where I live, it's fast food, it's junk, it's everywhere. Not to mention the price difference, right? There's so many ways to justify. I mean, I hear all these different, I call them excuses, but it's justifications of it's too expensive. I'm too busy to meal prep. I'm too busy to cook whole foods, right? And I'm like, I understand their point. I understand where they're coming from. And I'm sure you've had this question when they've walked into your office. I'm a busy individual. Where can I start? I understand I've got to stay consistent. I understand I've got to work on the breakfast first, and then I can work on these other things. But how do I get these whole foods? How do I get the food that I need in my body, right? To treat it like a temple without feeling overwhelmed of what to put in my body. Do you have any tips or tricks or strategies that have worked for other individuals? Because I know firsthand, when I don't know what to put in my body, what happens when we get confused? We end up going with what we're familiar with. It's easy. I'll stop by and get a double cheeseburger, order a pizza because I'm tired, I'm fatigued. But when we know what's coming in our body, what I know when I'm having Monday morning, Tuesday morning, Wednesday morning, for lunch, for dinner, it's easy. It's a plug and play.
That is a great question, and that is definitely a question that comes up. In fact, the client that I was talking about that he did so well in his program is on the road whining and dining clients all the time. So we really had to work hard to make whatever we could happen at home. It was so challenging. So let's talk about at home first, and then we'll talk about what happens when you're on the road, because a lot of us travel too, and that is a nightmare trying, unless you're going to pack up, in your little backpack with
Yeah.
all your stuff.
Hey, I've done that.
Yes, and I have done that too. I just got back from a trip where my kids live in Denver. 2 of my kids out of the 4 live in Denver, and I ate like a 20-year-old for a week. So I had to like find my own way to and from. But we'll talk about it home. So at night, most people do a dinner at home. They will cook a dinner at home, and if they can handle that, I always say, let's just have basics always have the same basics in your fridge. So I'm lucky. My husband's a hunter, so I have a freezer full of venison. So I have a choice every day. But we get that organic chicken in there every week. We get the same things over and over again. We just kind of plug and play, put that in the fridge. And it's ironic because I think I heard Lauren talk about this on your last podcast about just really, it's okay to do the same thing over and over again. And people come in and say, well, I like variety. And I'm like, of course you do, because you've been eating out and you're getting variety. You haven't trained your palate or your gut. And I always have broccoli, cauliflower, mixed greens, and spinach. I mean, they're always in my fridge. I always have some kind of fruit all the time. And then that way, so let's say I have a really rough day and I didn't overcook. So what I do is when I say overcook, I don't mean like cook too well. I mean, double cook what you're doing at night. That's your lunch for the next day or your breakfast. Let's get out of the box of breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Maybe, some night you're really fried, come home and make an omelet. And that's your dinner, even though it's breakfast. And maybe for breakfast, yesterday I had salad and venison backstrap for breakfast because my chickens didn't pump out enough eggs this week. So I was like, all right, we're doing venison.
That's good.
Did you notice your body, do you notice a difference, like from what you would normally have eaten, like energy levels, mindset, or did it line up pretty much with how you'd felt?
I actually felt better on that than I did on the eggs and veggies. And I don't know why. It could have been the day. I'd have to like really experiment a little bit more. And that's it. You are a science experiment, N equals 1. So just experiment with that. I kind of actually liked it too. So I thought, maybe that's something I might want to do more often is my leftovers. And then I could always have eggs or something for lunch. But again, looking ahead, I know everybody says, I don't have time. But we have time to scroll. We have time and I will tell you, in the time it takes me to make 3 eggs, throw some spinach in, throw some fruit on the side, it takes me longer to go through a drive-through and wait for my food. And it's interesting to me that people want to go have the breakfast sandwich because they don't have time, or they want to drink somebody's coffee with some really strange cream in it that has all these oils like canola and soybean oil in it. But literally at home, they could be showering in that coffee. Organic coffee could be brewing, and they could be having the organic half and half. So when I talk to clients, this is the thing, we change the mindset again. What are you really saying? What are you really saying? What loss are you having? What grief are you having over giving up those habits? It's not about changing to new ones sometimes. It's about giving up the familiar. And you've used that word a couple times, and I love that because familiar and comfort, even if it's unhealthy, we go to it. Yep. And the other side of this is when you're out, please remember that restaurants, okay, you don't have to be perfect. We don't have to be perfect. Sometimes, I have to, go somewhere and I'll have to pick up a beef stick and, something out of the gas station, not a Slim Jim. I try to look for those good beef steaks. But I've been on the road and I've had to grab a Greek yogurt or hard boiled eggs that are already made, which are kind of weird, but we do what we have to do.
Yeah.
But when you're out, remember that every place you go is using these really crappy oils. And people are starting, when I train them to feel what's going on in their body after they eat these things, people are telling me, oh yeah, I have a cough when I have French fries. Oh yeah, I have congestion when I eat a burger from this place. Worst case scenario, get something where you just get the protein and the salad. And everybody thinks Chick-fil-A is so much healthier. But the bottom line is, if you have to go there, grilled chicken and a salad, that's not horrible, but it's not necessarily healthier. Chipotle, get it on greens and get, the meat, and you can have a few beans if you want for your carbs. There's ways around it, but we're so familiar. I grew up, this is kind of embarrassing, but before I got pregnant with my first son, I had this obsession. Actually, I did when I was pregnant with him. I had this obsession with the 2 cheeseburger French fry combo meal. Diet Coke, of course, because you have Diet Coke even though you're eating all this crap. And that was familiar. Yeah. But I grew up with that because when we were younger, that was our night out. We didn't go to fast food every day. We would go out, and that was a treat to go get our combo meal at McDonald's. So some people are attached. So when we talk about emotions around food, we're attached to familiar and love and connection and comfort. Yeah.
I saw one of your Instagram videos. It was hilarious. You drove up to a drive-through, and you're like, "I'll have an order of the menopause, and I like my hot flashes extra hot." And there's a whole slew of it. If for you listening, you should go check that video. It's very funny. But it's reality, right? Like, we're asking for this pain through a window. It's cheap money, and but it's comfortable. And we're not aware of what's actually going on. Because if you were to observe and ask someone, hey, what's going to go on here and how's it going to end up? Everybody knows that's not good. And yet we still do it for some psychological reason. Like you're saying, it's that we're getting something out of it that we don't know, and creating those that familiarity. It's ruts. We've created ruts that need to be filled in and shifted and make new ruts towards the healthy stuff. And it's just patterns, right? And habitual. But it starts with that psychology, like you're saying. It's like you gotta get past that, which is just fascinating to me. Which again should give everybody hope, because no matter what you're doing right now, there is something you just haven't found it yet. So there's just another direction you need to try before you find those results, like what it is you're looking for.
One of the things we haven't touched on either is a lot of tactics, a lot of tips, a lot of strategies. But like I'm a macro guy, I'm a vision guy, because it has to be sustainable. So tying emotion behind it, right? Like why do I want to eat 80-20 rule? Why do I want 17, 18 of my meals out of 21 meals, right? Because there's going to be fatigue. I'm going to be tired. I'm going to be exhausted, stress, anxiety, all these things. So when those times happen, I have to have a system in place on what's the bigger picture here, right? And so, yes, I give myself grace. Yes, I give myself compassion, but I'm a big, and you can talk to this a little bit. We can wrap things up. I can't believe we're already 41 minutes into this time, but I can keep going on because this is my place right here. I love this. I love talking food. But do you ever speak to your clients about vision and coming up with, like, do you want to be there for your grandkids? Do you want to wake up the next morning and not be in pain? Do you want to wake up and not be sick 15 times a year, right? Because I hear it all the time from people. I'm sick. I'm sick. I'm sick. Well, the reason you're sick is because what did you put in your body the last 2 days? That's my number one question. You're sick? What did you put in your body the last 2 or 3 days? And 9 times out of 10, it's a muffin, it's a cookie, it's a pizza, and that was me. I was getting sick multiple times a year. I was like, this is what I'm familiar with because everybody else around me is sick. So this is natural. I'm supposed to be sick, right? No, I'm not. I'm not supposed to be sick multiple times a year. Right? It was because I was putting the wrong things in my body. So until I started focusing on the macro, the bigger picture, right? What do I want my life to look like? How do I want to show up? How do I want to feel tomorrow morning when I get out of bed? What are the things that I want to do? Do I want to sleep better? Till I started focusing on the bigger picture, that's what allowed me to stay sustainable and connect that emotion. Do you resonate with that?
Oh, that's so powerful. When we know our bigger why, not just shrinking our body, not just having this image, not just having six pack abs, not just having all the things that we think society wants us to have, and we dig into our own lives, we can really find that why. And when I talk to men and women, there's different reasons why they want it. Some people have athletic goals still. Some people have, like you said, the grandkids. They want to be able to get up and down off the ground, which is actually really challenging for some people. Some people want to be able to walk with their spouse every night after dinner. And it's funny because they won't be able to come up with it right away. So I'll share with them. I'm like, okay, I'll tell you something. For me, as a 57-year-old woman with 4 kids between 19 and 24, none of my kids have had children yet. I do want to keep this up because someday I'm going to be taking those children for them. I'm going to want to take them to Disney. I want to do all these things. But right now, I want to hike with my kids in Denver. I want to hike with my spouse. My dad is 82 years old and still hiking. And
Right.
that is
Love
such,
that.
yeah, that is such, and he was always a really good influence. Do you want to be a legacy for your kids and teach them how health really works, and that you don't have to look at TikTok to see what you're supposed to be looking like? You can look from inside, and what do you really want out of life? There's no way that I could go hiking and do all these things without eating well. We can talk about exercise as a whole nother like podcast in itself on what you choose to do to create the body muscular and endurance and all of that. But when you're not feeding it, you're not feeling well. And we haven't even touched upon, for example, like intermittent fasting. And everyone wants to look at what everybody else is doing. And if you're not digging into your own why, and you're doing that not for health reasons, you're doing it for skinniness, for example, then you're going to end up doing some damage, and it's going to be hard for you to get out of that. But our why in everything we do. So think about, like, I have women who are also starting businesses. So how you treat your body and how you plug in with food, exercise, stress, sleep is how you're going to present yourself in your business also. So what you give to one thing, if you're not giving it to yourself first, your business and your clients, they are going to suffer. Your audience is going to suffer. There's so much more. I always try to tell everyone, you are important. You're number one. You need to be you, but you are bringing it into the world, and your purpose is going to suffer if you're not taking care of yourself.
And that's the truth.
Mic drop.
Mic drop, man, right there.
Well, Kim, you've been fantastic, and we're already at the 45-minute. I don't know about you, and I'm sure you can probably speak the same, but we could probably sit here and talk for the next 3 or 4 hours. You have just
All
been a breath
day.
of fresh air. And if our listeners and audience are listening, man, I always like to say you're welcome for just the value bombs that you've dropped today. So we really appreciate your time, energy, and effort today. Thank you for connecting with us. Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for serving and impacting not only myself and you and inspiring us, but to our listeners. So people will be listening to this for the next 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years. So we really appreciate you today. 2 final questions. The first question is, where can our listeners and audience support you? How can they support you?
Oh, that's great. Thank you. I can be reached most easily on Instagram at Kim Hynes Health, but I also would love for everyone to come over to the Emotional Eats podcast, because I have some beautiful experts coming on that are sharing some amazing information to help you. And I also do a lot of solo podcasts based on the emotional eating side of things. So I have some on secret eating, emotional eating, forbidden foods, things like that. But also, I have a wonderful Facebook community called the Emotional Leads Community, and just a great group of women who are getting together. And if you're a guy and you want to connect, I do only private consultations with men. We are thinking about starting up a group, but for now it's all women. But thank you. That's where you can find me. And it's pretty easy. Kim
We'll
Hynes
put
Health.
links. We'll put links on social media to those on Facebook and all that stuff, so people can click and go subscribe and follow and like and all the good stuff. So,
Thank you.
Welcome. Final question. Second, what does level up and live mean to you, Kim Hynes?
Oh, I love this question. I believe that leveling up, you live when you do level up. And when we level up and we give exactly what I was saying before, is when you give a certain percentage, and I don't like this 100, 150%, but at the same time, anything that you can do that makes you feel like you are putting yourself really out there, whether it is eating the best that you can, but enjoying your food also, moving your body, giving and teaching to other people in your world, authentically being you, though, when you do all of that, because your purpose cannot be fulfilled if you're doing it to be somebody else. And that's another way to be really healthy, is to authentically be yourself and to not people please. It's great to be kind, but people pleasing is different. And when you level up, you're doing things that you know are right, not out of obligation. And when you level up, you also know that you are there just to not only we take care of ourselves first, but to really impact other people. And it doesn't have to be as big as what we're trying to do. You are impacting every person you come in contact with every single day. It can be your family, it can be your neighbor, it could be someone in the grocery store. So when you level up, just acting like yourself and giving. And I think that's a really great way to live your life and feel fulfilled, but fulfill other people's lives too.
Mm.
I feel joy and
Beautifully said.
uplifted from that response. That was just great. It feels so good. Awesome.
Thank
Kim,
you.
thanks so much for coming on the show. We always say at the end of the show, we say level up and live. So we're saying that to you, level up and live, to all the audience, everything. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great.
Awesome.
Level up and live.
Thank you for tuning in to the Level Up and Live podcast. A huge thank you to our awesome guest, Kim Hynes, for sharing her wisdom and experiences with us today. Remember to subscribe so you never miss an episode, and leave us a review sharing what you liked about the episode today. Share this episode with someone who needs to hear it, and explore our show notes for more resources. Keep growing, keep learning, and keep leveling up your life.